was that they wanted to provide the opportunity that if there is favorable action at the April town meeting on this particular matter, and it isn't acted upon favorably at the ballot, they can still move forward on these plans. If it's acted favorably in April and acted favorably upon at the May ballot, we would then, in October, come back and rescind the action of the April town meeting and use the debt exclusion portion of funds so that it wouldn't impact the general operating budget of the town. Again, it was requested by the school committee, so we had it placed on there. They will be sponsoring it, and I don't know if the finance committee has taken a position at this point.
Haven't met yet to do that.
Mr. Jones answers in the negative. Again, I would suggest that when we have our joint meeting with the school committee, we could. I don't, again, pretend to speak for them. All I know is that I was contacted by the chair, told of the affirmative action of the school committee to request the article to put on, and I had it placed on. Mr. Smith.
I think it definitely has a definite impact on the general operating budget. And I guess my question to you, Brad, is if in fact this is passed at town meeting, the bonded impact on the bonded debt account, how much does it impact it? How long a period of time? We look at the bonded for 5 years?
Yeah, the bond would be for 5 years. What was it, 300,000?
300,000.
I figure 60,000 a year plus 20% interest, so as a round ball, so.
So I mean, there's a definite impact on the operating budget by doing this. And I guess my other question, in 1996 they passed a law of the borrowing powers for communities. If in fact there's an outstanding bonded debt on any one of these two buildings similar to this schematic designs, and that bond is running, if this bond is taken out within a 5-year period of that, doesn't this bond have to be paid off the same timetable that the present bond has to be paid off? So is it possible that this bond would have to be paid off in 3 years or 2 years or whatever bonds that are outstanding on those buildings are right now?
You've lost me on that subject, I don't know.
Yeah, I was going to ask that question of Tom outside of tonight, just so you can check.
I don't know the answer either.
I just know. I'll ask the board first, Joe. If in fact that law applies, if in fact it does, it steps up the bonded debt by. Are you familiar with this one?
No, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah. And if in fact it does, it steps up the bonded debt.
Affects our bond rating for the other items we're going to.
Absolutely.
Exactly. I know where you're going with that.
So that's where I'm going with it. But it does impact the operational budget immensely. And I just think by leaving it on the ballot in May, that's a funding source of its own, and it keeps it out of the operational budget. I think that's the place it should have stayed. But I mean, it's on there. If they vote for it, they vote for it. But I think it takes a definite impact on the operational budget.
But again, the other thing is that if the plans are done and then they come forward with, again, the ultimate goal obviously is to come forward with a definitive plan for the renovations and additions to the middle and high school, which I think everybody kind of agrees that something's going to be done there, will be subject to another debt exclusion, bonded debt exclusion. Again, this would be considered for the reimbursement as part of the whole package, regardless of how it gets funded.
Brad, did you say you favor this article, or you don't favor, you haven't had a meeting?
I'm not taking a position.
You haven't taken a position?
Placed on the warrant, we have not met, we don't meet formally again until a week tomorrow, the 27th. That's one of the articles we would have to act on.
Because I know early on in this year, you increased the bonded debt account by either 25 or 75, but which was it? You stepped it up by how much money?
Last year, we increased bonded debt to 475, with the differential coming from stabilization. This year, we have the same 475. We're taking 100,000 of free cash, and I'm presuming, pending the final debt schedule, maybe 30,000 out of stabilization. So we were trying to avoid touching stabilization minimally this year. Hence, we reserved 100,000 of free cash towards it.
All right, and there again, as you pointed out in here, if in fact we bond too much debt and we reduce our reserves, the cost of the borrowing goes up. So the cost of the borrowing is $300,000 goes up in total cost.
Depending on what you're bonding, and most of the items that are on the capital budget, like the road program, et cetera, are 5-year bonding. They're not buildings that can go out 15, 20 years.
Yeah. Okay.
Any further comments in relation to that? As I said, I think we'll have to wait to hear from the school committee a little bit more. Make a recommendation. Article 17 is, again, another one that I reserved the spot for. Again, purchase of map 62, parcel 64, 193 Elm Street property. Again, this was property that was owned by Mr. Rowe's father. And again, as we stated a couple of weeks ago, the town would have first refusal on the property after there's a bona fide deal and comes to consummation. That it has to come to the town. The town has 120 days. Again, driving by, I saw the sold sign out front there, so I was anticipating that there may be an offer to the town. If it were to transpire prior to the April town meeting, then we would have a spot reserved in order to take some favorable action or unfavorable action, but at least the town would have to make a decision on it. Have the opportunity to make a decision on it. And the decision should probably lie, in my belief, in the town meeting, not necessarily with this board, as far as, we can make a recommendation, but as far as purchasing large parcels of land which come under this particular chapter of Mass General Laws, to me, town meeting should decide whether or not they want to take the property and purchase it. And again, this is actually a preferred method of buying it, because usually when we get it up in court, as far as eminent domain takings, we usually pay more than the fair market value for things. It just seems to work out that way. But this one here would just be a set price, and the town would then have the opportunity to say yes or no to it. As far as any preconceived notions as to what use it would be for or anything else, there are none. Again, Mr. Girardi wrote a letter to the editor and expressed his opinions on things, which is fine. And based upon the limited information they may have, it may appear as though it would be some sort of a feasible consideration for the property. But again, Mr. Rowe, you can correct me, but it's approximately 28 acres. More than half of it is wet. I mean, I looked at the wetlands map. More than half of it is wet. Topographically, it drops off in the rear. And as far as the developability of the property, the full 28 acres would not be available for development. Fair assessment? You can comment on it, because it's maybe another thing. You're not going to be making a recommendation, but you're much more familiar with the property than I am.
I'd suggest you don't say.
I would say make me an offer.
And again, as far as the outcome, let me just state up front too, as far as whether or not the town purchases it or a private developer purchases it, it doesn't have any effect on Mr. Rowe in relation to the outcome. The dollar amount's still the same, and whatever happens, happens, and whoever ends up owning it, ends up owning it. It's just the town has first refusal as a result of what his father had done in seeking to make it in relation to farmland. So there's no direct impact to Mr. Rowe or his family other than who ends up owning it. But is it just as far as the property itself, 28 acres, substantial wetlands, correct? I mean, if your preference is not to comment, that's fine.
I really prefer not to say anything.
So I can comment on it. From what I can understand, there's between 6 and 7 buildable lots. That's my understanding right now from looking at the proposals and stuff. And that's not cast in stone, but that's what it looks like.
And again, but as far as the potential use for it, again, there has been no discussion by any town boards, committees, commissions, or anything else. In my estimation, it should not be a factor in any deliberations that are currently before the town, whether it be for a new school site, whether it be for the police station site, or anything else. We have some very definitive plans that have been well thought out and are being put forth for consideration in relation to those two specific projects. And the information I got from town hall here, you might have 12 acres available for development there. The rest of it is substantially wetlands of the 28. That doesn't render, and then we have to talk about the topography and what has to be done there if you're going to use it for any other type of municipal purposes. So I just want to make it very clear that the only reason that there's a space reserved for it here, it's not to muddy the waters, it's not to plant any new ideas in people's heads. It just seems to be a timing issue in relation to whether or not a proposal comes to the town for consideration, and would, if it does come prior to the April town meeting, then, we can make a decision on it. If it doesn't, my recommendation, I think, probably the board, but I don't mean to speak for anybody, would be just to pass over at this time, because we don't have any numbers and we have nothing to act upon. I was just hoping to avoid a special town meeting should the offer come in to the community prior to the April town meeting. Mr. Vino.
Just for clarification, Mr. Chair, as we spoke about this prior to the meeting, the article does call for it, though, for being taken solely for recreation and open land. I would assume we could not turn around and build a building on that. Am I correct or wrong? I mean, I'm just asking,
Well,
because that's what it calls for.
That's what it calls for as far as the purchase of it at this point. I mean, town meeting can go back in a minute. This is not an eminent domain taking, which would be specified as to what it would take if they can act on the legislature, so we don't undo
So we could take it under that guise and then go back to another town meeting and change it after we've already taken it for that purpose. I'm asking.
Yeah, without having
Yeah.
running through council, my guess is the town probably...
I just think that would be a little deceiving.
I don't disagree.
Second.
I don't disagree.
Yeah. Well, no, it would
I don't
be.
disagree, but to me, this particular, we don't get the opportunities very often, and this is just talking about the merits of the article
Yeah, no, I
itself. The
understand.
opportunities don't present themselves very often, they only present themselves once generally, for the town to avail themselves of the purchase of large tracts of land for open space or whatever other purpose we may deem necessary, or even just to land bank it for future municipal use, because we don't know what's coming down the road. But, let's wait and see if the offer comes into the community. We have 120 days to act upon it once it comes in. And if it comes up prior to April town meeting, we'll act on it. If it doesn't, let it go.
I do understand that, I just wish the wording was a little different, that's all.
Well, you may have an opportunity to reword it, because we don't have any offer yet. Now, Mr. Pasquale.
When I read it, and I know who owned the land because I knew Dana's father, I'd like to keep it squeaky clean, everything I do. And I'm glad he's refraining from talking, because some people are gonna read this. I'm not too popular in the town sometimes, and his name and a few others. So they see this and they may think that Dana's got something, Dana, the select. Number two, Dana, I lived in 23 Owen Road, as you know. And there's all power lines over there. Wait a minute, I just got the easement. That's what I was going to ask. You got the easement. Excuse me, can I speak?
Yeah, excuse me. Did you do it through the chair? Mr. Pasquale, you have the floor.
I don't mean to be rude to you. Who has the title to the property? Because it says successor. See, if your dad isn't here, it's either you or your sister. So I would like to know, in the title, what did it say about the easements relative to the telephone, the power lines? That's what I wanted to know before I go to town meeting.
Mr. Rogers?
Yeah, the power lines were, if you look at on the map, there's a long strip that's owned by the town of Danvers right alongside that. That's actually where the power lines were. They weren't on this property.
Thank you. Thank you.
And let me just state for the record that the inclusion of this article was done solely by myself, without consultation with Mr. Rowe. And I just, again, driving by, looking at the time frame, and looking at the time frame between the warrant having to go to print and exercising the option as a member of the board to have one included, I just thought it would be, if the opportunity presented itself, we could save the cost of a special town meeting in order to consider it. Nothing more, nothing less. Mr. Rowe was not a party to the inclusion of it or even the discussion of it. I assume full responsibility for it. No other member of the board did either. So I'm glad you brought that up. I hope I made it clear previously. If not, let me make it perfectly clear right now. I'm the only member of the board to propose this, nobody else. Mr. Spear.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I wanted to concur with Mr. Dino's interpretation of the law. I took a seminar this past weekend on 61 land.